I maybe had a tiny bit of a crush. That person is actually here right now. His name is Colby. Hey guys, I'm Mickala Williams. This is my very first YouTube video. I've been praying for every single person that's watching this, but I have an incredible story to share. God changed my life. I became a Christian 2 years ago. I can't think of anything else that I would want to share first than the story of how that happened. I was born in Missouri. I lived on a farm half the time in Missouri and then half the time in Orlando. I went to church until probably about 10 years old. I believed in God, but I didn't read the Bible. I didn't pray often. I didn't really know anything about Christianity or God. I just believed for no reason. I grew up very independent, and after high school, I decided to do a big 6-month road trip across the US. After that, I lived in Australia for 1 year. I lived in a town called Byron Bay at a hostel. There were so many people from all over the world. A lot of people asked about why I believed in God, why I'm a Christian. To be honest, I really had nothing to say. I couldn't tell one person why I believed in God other than I just believed, and that made sense to me. And so many people had other beliefs and weren't Christians. I tried to debate why I believed and hang on to that, but soon enough it got to a point where I couldn't even convince myself. That left me really discouraged. I really didn't want to talk to anyone about it. Typically, you don't want to talk about what you don't know. I figured one day I would do the research and figure out for myself what I truly believe. But if I'm being honest, I really wasn't in that much of a rush. I grew up thinking that I was a really good person. I tried to be a really good person, really tried so much. Loved people, saw people, tried to be the best person that I could be. And so part of me thought that if there really is a God, if there's a just God, a good God, that He would know my heart and that I would be saved and that I wouldn't go to hell. And I also always grew up, even, I had my fair share of hard times, still do. I was always able to be a very happy person. I didn't feel like I needed a God. So I was never really searching for a God at that point. Fast forward, COVID happens. I end up leaving LA and going to Florida for a little bit, and I made a new friend, someone who had a really strong faith and someone who I wanted to finally open up to and be vulnerable with and tell them like what actually happened. And that person is actually here right now if you want to say hello. His name is Colby.
Doing a YouTube video.
My first one ever. It's crazy.
There's something about like recording for your first time and being on camera that's super uncomfortable.
Anyways, so I met Colby, and he has a really strong faith, very open about his faith, and I maybe had a tiny bit of a crush at that time and wanted to open up to him about my true feelings on where I stood with believing in God, not believing, and that was that I did not believe. And I told him that, I told him why, what happened, exactly what I just told you, and he responded horribly.
Wow, this is news to me.
I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh. You've been set up.
Actually, Colby was, oh my gosh, so respectful, so encouraging. He really just made me feel like I was where I was supposed to be, and he gave me just the most basic fundamentals about Christianity. He told me about how salvation worked. He told me about the Trinity.
Here's the thing, it's that everybody starts somewhere. It's not a matter of I've been down this road and I know more than you and I can condemn you and look down upon you because you don't know the things that I know. No, everybody starts somewhere. And so for me to look down on somebody or for me to criticize somebody for not knowing things, it's actually funny because sometimes we have conversations and she's like, who's David? Like all these like fundamental basic Bible stories, like she just doesn't know. I think it's awesome.
Not anymore. I
thought it was really interesting because it's like I felt like everybody went to Sunday school, but like she really didn't know, and I think it's really cool. But no, everybody starts somewhere. I feel like a lot of people avoid the things that they don't know, so they don't want to talk about them, and so it's hard for people to actually find people that really do understand the Bible Bible, understand what it's talking about, understand the plan and what Jesus did for us. And so when you know that and you're confident in that and you're passionate about that, you can articulate that. But more than anything, it's not about shoving your faith down somebody's throat. It's about being a friend. You know, it's about saying, hey, you're starting this thing. Let's like get you where you need to go.
And I didn't know anything. I mean, I didn't know how Jesus and God were connected. I didn't know anything about the Holy Spirit. Didn't know how salvation worked. Literally knew nothing about the Bible. So if you feel that way, like you just don't know so many things in the Bible, I mean, I'm still learning so much. God can show you so much. So when I was having that conversation with Colby, I remember I felt just so deeply in my heart, like I just felt this stirring that I really wanted to give this all I had. Like I just wanted to try. And so I decided at that moment, I'm gonna give it all I have and just see what happens. And so lucky to have someone who's been walking with God for so much longer, who could show me what Bible to get me a couple of journals, just help me get started. It's hard to know where to start. It's intimidating and it's confusing.
Don't be intimidated. Just get around people that know what they're talking about. Proud of you.
Thanks for being here.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. So after that point, I wanted to go all in. Some of the things that I started to do, I started to read my Bible every day, which was interesting. A lot of the things I was on the same page with, but there's definitely a lot of things in there that I was like, I don't see that happening, or I don't think that's possible, that I was going to try to implement in my life. I did try. I started to go to church, and then I would listen to worship music. I started to try to journal. I started to listen to like 3 hours of podcasts a day. I started to pray. The only thing that I had a really big disconnect with was praying. It just didn't feel authentic. And I'm the kind of person who, if I don't feel it, I'm not gonna pretend that I feel it. So when it came to not believing in God, I wasn't gonna hide that I didn't believe in God. I was okay with that. But I also knew that prayer is very important. So I started to pray for a few things all the time. 4 things. The first thing is to have more faith, because I heard on my podcast, you can ask for more faith, and I read in the Bible, you can ask for more faith. Another thing is to feel God's presence, because people talked about that all the time, and I had no idea what that meant. The third thing is to hear God's voice, because so many people could hear God's voice. The last thing was to love prayer. So I prayed, God, I want to love prayer. I want to pray to you all the time, God. I just prayed for him to change my heart, because I heard you can pray for that. I was just doing all these things, just trying. That's literally all I was doing. And I remember hearing something, and it was believe to see, not see to believe. And the people that were sharing their testimonies, I didn't think they were making up these stories. I just didn't have any of my own stories. But I decided to believe and then to know that I would see. Fast forward a lot. I was listening to like the Whoa That's Good podcast with Sadie Robertson. I heard a lady named Alex Seeley, who's a pastor in Nashville, Tennessee. I had never been to Nashville, never planned on going. However, I actually wrote down the Belonging Co. in my notes. And that was the first like church pastor sermon I had ever written down since becoming a Christian. I didn't think anything of it. Months and months go by. I'm looking for a place to live in Florida. All of a sudden, just so many people start speaking to me about Nashville in a really weird way. And they would just say, I don't know why, I feel like you're from Nashville. Are you from Nashville? I don't know why I feel like you and Nashville are connected. For some reason, I just feel like you should move to Nashville. And then one of my best friends in LA, he has been praying, and she really feels like we're supposed to be roommates, and she's considering maybe Florida, because she knew I was looking at Florida, or Nashville specifically. And I just felt this really weird peace about Nashville. So I said, I feel like we're supposed to move there. We moved there, worked out perfectly, and I moved there on September 20th, 2021. 7 months later from the day I wrote down the Belonging Co. in my notes. And of course, I didn't really think too much. I was like, we're moving to Nashville, I feel this weird peace, let's do it. Then I remembered, I was like, oh my goodness, I wrote down that random church in Nashville, the Belonging Co. That should be the first church we church hop at. We went there one time together, there, and I knew it was going to be my home church. It was amazing. Best church experience I had had. A week later, after I moved to Nashville, I go on a little vacation in Alabama on Lake Martin, and I actually left that whole trip 2 days early just to drive 4.5 hours all the way back to Nashville to go to this meet and greet at my new church, The Belonging. I didn't want to go, but I had such a strong something inside of me that I knew I needed to go. So I went. I went straight into the auditorium and I sat down, and a young man next to me, his name was Johnny, he introduced himself. He asked, what I did there. I said, oh, I just moved to Nashville, like still figuring things out. And he said, no, like what do you do here? I was like, oh, I've only been to church here one time. He was like, oh, this is like a staff night for the people that are on the team and who serve here. This is a team night. And I was like, it was on the Instagram. I thought it was a meet and greet. So he was like, well, you might as well just stay. And so I did. And then on the other side, a woman and her husband came and sat down, and her name was Kate. And Alex, she came out and started to talk about deliverance and the different kinds of spirits, how easy it is when you are in contact with sin, it leads to different spirits, and spiritual warfare is very real. And so Alex just talked about the discernment of spirits and about spiritual oppression and spiritual possession and just what that looks like. I felt a lot of things from my past coming up that I thought I had forgiven, but clearly had not. When you've experienced sin, it opens up the door for the demonic. Don't let the spirit of fear among so many other spirits make a home inside of you. I remember when she was talking, everything she was saying was exactly what I needed to hear. I knew it was what everyone needs to hear. It was so important, especially if we're up against this every single day of spiritual warfare is so real, and it is. We need to be knowledgeable. Alex said she wasn't planning on doing this, but she asked everyone to bow their head and said, if anyone feels like they didn't get the breakthrough that God wants to give them, or they feel like there's still something inside that needs to be dealt with, to come forward to the altar. And I remember feeling with all my heart, I knew God was calling me to go forward. And that was the first time I had ever felt like I heard him leading me to do something. I knew that I was supposed to go forward. I looked around and more people went forward than stayed behind. I did not move forward. I had never felt so stuck in my life. That's the enemy. I had fear. I couldn't move. So I didn't. I told you I was stuck. I was not moving. So I just started to pray and just talk to God myself. And I had never had so many intimate moments with God praying at that time. It was the most beautiful thing in the world. Then the woman next to me, Kate, she tapped on my shoulder and she said, I'm sorry. I hope this isn't weird. I feel like God is telling me something about you. Are you a prisoner? And I remember staring at her. I was crying and I was shocked. I actually didn't even respond to her. And she said, I feel like God is telling me that you really need to go forward. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's crazy, because this is the first time I've ever felt like God was leading me to do something in the moment, and it was to go forward. And she was like, why don't you? And I said, I don't even know how to kneel like that. Remember, I didn't really grow up in church that much. And I said to her that it was fear, is exactly what we were talking about. She asked if she could walk me down there, which to this day is just so sweet. I, crying, shook my head, yes. And this is the girl who is fearless, grew up so independent, traveled the world by herself, and here I am shaking my head, yes, crying for this woman to walk me down to kneel at the altar. I go down there, I get on my knees, and I start to just pray. And a woman comes to pray over me, and she's prophesying. This was all new to me, and she's speaking exactly what I was praying about in my private time praying to God. It was insane. And I had never felt God's presence like that. I felt God's presence from head to toe, all throughout. It was the most glorious feeling. Just so much peace, so much love. His tangible presence since that night, I can explain it a little bit better, just feels like a weighted, peaceful presence. It's so beautiful. So I thanked Kate and I thanked the person who prayed over me. And then I ended up leaving. I was just in shock of everything that just happened. It was nothing like I had ever experienced. I went in my car and I was just driving, and I was crying, and I was just thanking God and just talking to God and just thanking him so much for what just happened. I couldn't believe it. While driving in the car, as I was praying and thanking him, I heard God say, grow closer to me, which like made me lose my mind. I could not believe all of this. I still can't believe it. And I got so much more faith. From that night on, I loved prayer. From that moment, the Bible became real. From that moment, God became real. I got home. I was trying to think of some of the things that I was remembering in church about my past, some past hurts. My brain like literally could not think one negative thought. Like I couldn't even finish a bad thought. Every time I would try to think of something that was bad from my past, it was like my mind would just go to a picture of God's goodness, God's glory. All I could think of was his goodness. And to this day, I can honestly say that that has never happened to me again in that way where I literally couldn't think one negative thing. And I really feel like that was like a little taste of heaven, like only praiseworthy thoughts. Since that point, that's when I became so convicted, when I started to really believe God's word. What he says in the Bible is true, everything. That's when I started to want to pray to God all the time. Literally all the time, because I know he's listening and he wants to answer my prayers, and he loves me so much. God has changed my life. I can't believe that God is real. I cannot believe that life can be this good. I was missing something that only God could provide. I never had like the purpose that God has given me, the fulfillment. I never knew the truth about why I'm here. I'm so glad I got all of those words out. I hope they made sense. I have been praying so much about this moment, and I just cannot wait to continue sharing more of what God has done. My favorite thing is connecting with others. I cannot wait to get to know you. I can't wait to hear from you. And I love you so much. Thanks so much for watching.